Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony up on the hill here Sunday morning, June 1st, believe it or not. So this is going to be the astrology overview of June 1st to the 7th, first week of June. We've got a couple things going on. It's not super busy week. Venus and Mercury are both pretty active, and so we'll talk about that. We're in between lunations here. We had the new moon in Gemini last week. Next week we'll have the full moon in Sagittarius. We'll talk about that next Sunday. But here in the middle of that zone, we have a couple things, like I said, Venus and Mercury. So Venus is in Aries. It's been in Aries. You know, it went into Aries, backed into Pisces, then went back into Aries. Still there. It's almost done. Okay. Before it leaves Aries, though, right here today on Sunday, June 1st, it's actually in a conjunction with Chiron in Aries. Chiron has been in Aries since 2018, I believe, and it's got another year or so left before it moves on to Taurus. And this Chiron in Aries has been very much about getting in touch with the wounding, any kind of like childhood wounding associated with not being good enough, not being capable enough on our own, essentially, because Aries has to do with that kind of individuality, okay? So it's had us confronting wounds associated with being too dependent on others and not being able to like generate sovereignly from within, okay? So it's served its purpose, okay, and it's still there. Venus hitting Chiron there today is really, in a way, it's taking us back to this sextile we had between Chiron and Aries and Jupiter and Gemini that just started separating a couple weeks ago, and that was been with us since October. I've talked about that before. And so that has also been getting us in touch with that wounding, but by giving us a sense of being able to expand our minds and see things from a different perspective, see things from a more abundant perspective and not so limited. And so with Venus touching Chiron today, and then it's going to be sextiling Jupiter on Wednesday, it's bringing that aspect back into play, kind of checking up on us, essentially, since that period from October to early May was, you know, had its moments, okay? And so Venus is coming in for a wellness check, if you want to think of it like that. And so today, we're really focused on, with that Chiron conjunction, is, you know, we might be actually facing situations in life that are forcing us into a corner, in a sense, and making us have to rely on ourselves to do something small even, but just something that we do that we're not reliant on the outside that can change things in our life, okay? Whatever that small thing is, that can make a big difference. It can have a big ripple effects, okay? And then when Venus forms a sextile to Jupiter on Wednesday, Jupiter's in Gemini, now there's a sense of, you know, if we do that confrontation here today, it's going to set up the stage for midweek when we'll be able to see things opening up for us. So by making those small changes now, completely from ourselves, no help from the outside, as small as it might be, we can start seeing how that is opening things up, opening up potentials and possibilities. Venus and Jupiter are both considered benefic planets, okay? And they're both in loose signs, they're in masculine signs, so they're in a lot of movement. Venus in Aries, Jupiter in Gemini. And so we can see an expansion of possibilities opening up. Okay, so here today we're confronted with this, you know, looking at those wounds and that perception of limitation and doing that small thing. Maybe it's just one little small thing. And if we can make that adjustment, it's going to open things up by midweek. Okay, then the baton gets switched over to Mercury. Now Mercury in Gemini, same sign that Jupiter's in, Mercury is moving fast. It's, you know, in between retrograde, so it's at its fastest speed, essentially. And it's in a sign that it rules, Gemini. Just a lot of speed and movement associated with Mercury in Gemini, okay? And so Mercury, first off, on Thursday, is going to square the moon's nodes. So we have the North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo. And this is a precursor for next week's full moon in Sagittarius. So the full moon will be on the other side of the zodiac, forming that same square, though, to those nodes. Okay, we'll talk about that next week. But Mercury is bringing it up, essentially. It's kind of reminding us that, hey, we're on the horizon of a pretty big full moon that's going to force us to make some decisions. So Mercury in Gemini is just following up on that Jupiter in Gemini getting the sextile from Venus in Aries on Wednesday. It's basically saying, look, so these are all your options, you know, so what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to go with? You know, it can be like a little overwhelming, a little overstimulating, I think is probably a better term for it. in that we're going to be challenged with that full moon when something's going to come to our awareness, and we're going to have to make a decision, and we're challenged to use our intuition versus any worries or any like details that we would normally consider. So it's asking us to make decisions in a different way. But this week, later this week, it will be bringing that up. So pay attention once we switch over, to the second half of the week, the idea of like, options all of a sudden opening up and not knowing what to pick. Okay, but having to pick something and eliminate other things. Okay, then Mercury is going to create another precursor. So during that full moon next week in Sagittarius, that's going to form a grand trine essentially with Mars in Leo and that same Chiron in Aries we just talked about. Okay, and it's got all that fiery energy. It's really like a go time kind of thing. But what Mercury is going to do is stimulate that relationship between Mars and Chiron. Okay, so it's going to give us a chance to process things mentally before we have to move with it in our lives, in our decisions, to actually do something, to take action with it, which will be associated with next week's full moon. So next week's full moon is about action. Okay, this week is going to prepare us mentally for that action-taking energy, and we want to be taking action with confidence, and we're not going to be confident in ourselves unless we again face those wounds of limitation, which is what we're doing now. Okay, so this beginning of this week is setting the stage to basically say, I'm not perfect, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I'm able to go forward as I am now. That's really the challenge with Chiron and Aries in general, but with Venus highlighting that here today, that's bringing that back up because action's going to be required next week. So we're preparing for that action next week by building our confidence and our sense of hope and possibility this week. So we'll leave it there. It's a nice little day up here on the hill here in San Marcos, California, Southern California. This time is going by fast. We're in the 6th month of the year here already, and so we've got 5 months complete, 7 months to go. So 2025 is definitely on fire, on the rocket boosters, etc. That's going to be taking us to early 2026 when, again, Saturn-Neptune conjunction. If you haven't seen my webinar, do watch that. That is the big ticket, the big switch, societal evolution switch, Saturn-Neptune in Aries. So have a look at that. And other than that, we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you then. Bye.